Good afternoon, everybody. We'd like to call the meeting of the Special Commission on State Institutions to order. My name is Anne Fracht, and I'm one of the Commission's two co-chairs. Kate Benson is not present today, so Alex Green, our vice chair, will be leading the meeting with me today. As usual, before we begin, we would like to let everyone know that this commission meeting must follow the open meeting law. Any votes taken during the meeting will be done by a roll call vote. We ask that the commission members please mute themselves when they're not speaking and use the raise hands feature if they would like to speak. Before speaking, please state your name so everyone knows who's talking. For any questions posted from the audience in the Q&A for this meeting, CEDAR will be reviewing the questions and holding them until the end of the meeting. Today's meeting is scheduled for 2 hours. We'll be having a break around 4.
And this is Jennifer from CEDAR. We do want to make sure that everyone can participate, so we ask the following. We have CART services supporting our meeting today. These are captions that help people follow the discussion. If you need help turning on these captions, please let us know. We ask that people speak in a non-rushed pace and provide yourself with a brief pause for the CART transcriber to write what you have said. We ask that you speak with as few acronyms as possible. Doing so will help all participants to understand essential information that is shared here. We will try to remind folks of these items I just mentioned if needed during this meeting and to keep us on track. When we end this meeting, we will have notes made available based on what we talk about today. This meeting is also being recorded and the videos are available on the Commission's mass.gov page and on YouTube. Next slide, please. And I'll turn it over to you, Anne.
So we hope everyone has had a moment to look at the agenda. And these are the items that we'll be discussing today. We have some announcements. CEDAR will provide a recap of the last meeting. After we vote to approve last month's meeting minutes, we'll be discussing the schedule for the upcoming meetings. The bulk of the meeting will be a discussion about what we want to recommend for the framework for remembrance and records. Then we'll discuss any next steps and then wrap the meeting for a vote to adjourn. Next slide. We want to welcome Camille Karabach. I hope I didn't mess up your name. Who is the new representative from the Mass Office on Disability. Welcome, Camille. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, sure. I'm Camille Karabayich. I'm the new Council 1 for the Massachusetts Office on Disability, taking over for our former director who recently retired. Looking forward to hearing more in the meeting. Nice to meet everyone.
Thank you. We'd like to invite Emily from CEDAR to provide a high-level recap of our last meeting before we vote to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Anne. This is Emily from CEDAR. At the last meeting, the Commission voted to approve Alex Green as the Commission's Vice Chair. There was also a discussion about the upcoming Commission meetings in their schedule. At the time, there had not yet been an extension of the virtual meeting law that allowed commissions like this one to meet virtually. So the Commission passed a motion to hold the next meeting virtually as an accommodation to ensure access for everyone. there was an update that law was extended since our last meeting. So the commission also discussed 4 recommendations related to the framework for remembrance. The first was a discussion about possibly recommending that a disability history museum was created. The discussion included members suggesting reaching out to contacts from other museums to get more information on the planning process used for those museums. There was also a discussion of a perpetual care fund to support the remembrance. There was a discussion of a statewide day of remembrance to honor those who lived in Massachusetts state institutions. And lastly, there was a discussion about requesting a formal apology from the state of Massachusetts for the neglect of state-run cemeteries and the harm caused by state institutions. Thank you. Back to you, Anne.
Thanks, Emily. Before we go into this afternoon's discussions, we have our vote on the minutes from the commission's last meeting in March. Copies of the meeting minutes were emailed to members earlier this week. Do any members have suggested changes to the minutes? If not, we can proceed with the vote. As usual, we'll be conducting a roll call vote, but before Cedar reads out everyone's names, do we have a motion to approve the minutes? Please remember to state your name.
Jim Cooney, I move to approve the minutes.
Bill Henning, I second the motion.
Is there any discussion?
Okay, thank you, Anne. This is Christine from Cedar, and I'll do the roll call. I will now read out members' names in alphabetical order by your last names, and when your name is called, please respond with yes, no, present, or abstain. So I'll begin with Elise Aaron, Kate Benson is out, Sister Linda Bessam, Reggie Clark.
Here.
Thank you, Reggie. James Cooney.
Yes.
Thank you. Samuel Edwards.
Yes.
Anne Fract.
Yes.
Alex Green. Bill Henning.
Yes.
Camille Karabek.
I'll vote to abstain since I wasn't at the last meeting.
Thank you. Andrew Leverell.
Present.
Evelyn Mateo. Lori Medeiros.
Yes.
Vesper Moore.
Yes.
And Brenda Rankin. Thank you. Yes. Right. Did I miss anyone? Okay. Okay, it's
Thanks.
yours.
Thanks,
Anne.
everybody. The minutes are approved. As a reminder, the copies of the approved minutes and all the materials from our commission meeting are available on the commission's website. Next slide, please. The next item on the agenda is the schedule for the upcoming commission meetings. We're scheduled to meet on May 8th. Additionally, Cedar has sent out a doodle poll to determine if May 15th would be a suitable date to hold the meeting in order to finalize our work before submitting the special commission's recommendations to the legislature on June 1st. So far, we've only received 5 responses from commission members. Having a quorum is crucial. I'd like to open up the discussion to confirm whether enough commission members will be able to hold a meeting on May 15th. Are there any members who will not be able to attend the potential meeting on that date? Well, everybody here can make it on May 15th. Alex? That good for everybody? So we can set the meeting for May 8th and the 15th, May 15th. So we'll go with option 1 is to send out an invitation for May 15th. And now I'd like to turn it over to Alex.
Alex Green. Before we dive into the next thing, I would like to take one announcement up out of order here. This is Victor Hernandez's last day before he retires, and all of you know that this is a landmark commission, the likes of which has never existed before anywhere. It also would not exist without Victor, full stop, and we owe him everything that this has become in every way. And this took a lot of exactly what you get with 30 plus years of experience doing this kind of work, which is a lot of grace and a lot of patience and a deep understanding of how to get toward a solution and make something work for a large group of disabled folks, all of us have very different needs and ways of explaining things. So I didn't want to let that pass without just deep gratitude to you and the best wishes ahead in your retirement, and hopefully some rest and fun and time with family and all the good things you deserve ahead. So
thank you, Alex, and thank you, other members of the commission. It was my pleasure.
We now get to move into the cool stuff of the rec. Oh, Lori, go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I don't know if it's I'm on the recipient end of a softer version of you, or if you could speak up a little.
I was actually going to mention that too, Alex.
I will go louder. I have no idea what it is, but I'm happy to do so. So it's
thank you.
Thank you for saying something. All right, we get to dive back into recommendations today. What we're looking at doing, we're trying to identify, just kind of high level for the rest of today and these next couple of meetings, is we've been circulating, as you've seen. We've sent around recommendations for things that we may want to ask for in the executive summary to go with the report at the end. And today we're going to look at a lot of those different recommendations, and we're going to decide whether they're kind of easy ones to just say, yeah, we'll go with those, and from there we can kind of get the language just right over the coming weeks. And some members with different areas of expertise will need help doing that from you, but we'll get it there. And then there are going to be some things that we probably don't all agree on, or don't all agree on the way that they're kind of taking shape. And that's good. We should slow down and look at those and start to go into them and say, what do we want to do? So that brings us to this first thing. At the last meeting, we had a lengthy discussion regarding possibly recommending the creation of a disability museum dedicated to preserving the history of residents from state institutions. The museum would also highlight the independent living movement, the process of deinstitutionalization, and the ongoing efforts to integrate people with disabilities into society. It would be a resource hub offering links to records and information for former patients and their families who are looking for their historical records. Whether it's a physical or digital space, the goal would be to make it easily accessible to everybody. But this is a tricky decision, and this is a very weighty thing to call for. And so what we wanted to make space for the next 15 minutes or so was to discuss and brainstorm the pros, what might be good about doing something like this, and the cons of doing it, and in what way. Do you see pros in doing it as a digital thing or as a physical thing, or do you see cons in doing it as a physical or a digital thing? And I think that's going to help guide the report crew in our attempt to try to reflect what everybody wants, because I don't think we feel comfortable yet trying to characterize where everybody's at, and it would be really helpful to know just how folks feel about it. So to do that, Cedar has set up a cool new technological tool, the likes of which I have never seen and am eager to be guided through using, which is kind of like an online whiteboard with Post-it notes. And I don't know if you want to cue that up, Christine, but Jen, okay. So this is kind of how we're just going to be able to capture all this information, write it down, and then it'll be really useful for us to look at later. So the way this works is if you just want everybody the same sort of stuff that Anne was calling out, to raise your hand, say who is speaking when you come on, and share your thoughts about what you think might be a pro of having one in a certain way, or not at all, or cons, however you feel about it. And they're going to take those down. And I'll facilitate the conversation. So someone, as always, the uncomfortable teacher moment in me, someone's got to go first. So somebody go first. Lori, awesome. Go for it.
Yes, so I want to say one thing before I give you my thoughts. I worked for a number of years with Martha Ziegler. I don't know if anybody on this call knows or remembers her. Yeah, Victor. And one of the things that had always been a passion for her is to gather and preserve these records. So if you don't mind, in a little bit of a remembrance and honor of Martha Ziegler, that inspired me years ago, and it still does. And the reason is because Martha Ziegler moved, touched, and inspired me about getting that done. So I just wanted to in remembrance of her, say that. And so I also wanted to say, does it have to be one or the other? I really kind of feel like both have accessibility strengths and positives, and I can see that one or the other might leave some out. So I like the idea of both. And I just want to give a quick plug for the actual museum where you walk in. For years and years and years and years, I, of course, learned about, heard about, sought out, took courses and classes in the Holocaust. But until you go to a Holocaust memorial, as moving, touching, and deeply moving as the information is, to go to that memorial took my breath away because it was experiential. So there's something incredibly powerful in the physical remembrance, if you will. And if the word's museum, if it's a remembrance, whatever it is. Yet on the other hand, those for which the trip would be difficult or access would be difficult, the other would also have me be able to access it. So I feel like both have access points that one or the other would not have. So I don't know if it's an idea to go with one while simultaneously building the other, but that's just my input.
I don't know how others will feel about it, and it's to the rest of the commission to respond, but I love the clarity that you're putting forward here, and I just want to name, I heard a bunch of things in there that I think are good, so just make sure that I'm characterizing this right. I think with Ziegler, what you're saying that's important to kind of zoom out on is there are people who came before us in this work who wanted to be sure that these things would be remembered and memorialized, and I think that's really important. The second thing that I'm hearing you say is that a memorialization component of it, like what you've experienced at the Holocaust museums, is a crucial aspect of what makes any kind of museum effort, which also has teaching and other things as part of it, very powerful and essential to do. And then that if possible, that you see a real promise in trying to do both for the different access points of digital and physical. Is it fair to characterize those three things that way, Lori?
Perfect. Thank you.
You got it. Vesper Moore, you're up next.
Yes, Vesper speaking. I think when we talk about like some of the pros and cons here, there are a lot of requirements for what makes a museum, and there's a lot of time, and I think it can be very time consuming. And I think past use versus active use. So sometimes you have something on display versus it could be more of a community environment where people are engaging with this history in some type of way that could either be informally a gallery or something that may travel. I think the pro is, I mean, I would agree with some of the existing pros that are here for continuing education and just awareness and some of those pieces. But I think there's a question of is it a museum, or is it a community space or an online space, or both, which I think is a common conversation in the disability museum and historical space.
And can I ask just a follow-up question clarifying on that? Have you heard conversations, or do you envision then some kind of financial support or support in some way for if these things were to be exhibits or the use of existing spaces and supporting those to focus in this direction? What have you heard that are good things about that, and what are things that you've heard about that are not good that we should be warned about?
Well, for a museum environment, you would want someone to oversee the operations. So you would need a few FTEs, at least full-time employees, on site doing that work. You would need support for consultants in terms of handling temperature-controlled environments and materials and recommendations. There is like also the architectural element, depending on what building you're using, how much natural light comes into that space, how much darkness there is. There's a lot of thought that goes into it, a lot of thought. And I think that's just like kind of like, just to give you a sense, you need the employees, you need the funding, you need the space, there's architectural changes that might need to occur if you're using existing space, and then that's a challenge. Yes.
Much. Other folks, thoughts, comments, pros, cons, or things we're not considering at all. I want to be clear about where this falls. Like all of these, we will issue these as recommendations. And so there are lots of different ways to make a recommendation to the state. And you can think of how like the legislature does things. Sometimes they vote yes on things. Sometimes they vote no. Sometimes they vote to create a group like us to go look into something and find more out about it, and they give it instructions. They send it to be studied. There are lots of, it doesn't have to be legislators who do that. So sort of to sum that up, two components of what we're kind of after, I think, is, do we think there ought to be one at all? And then do we acknowledge what issues there might be in a way where we can help recommend how to set the things in motion to make it succeed? At a very blunt statement, it may be the feeling of everyone that this is not something we want to try to do, or we want to try to do something very different, or recommend something very different. And there's a lot in between there. Like Vesper is saying, what one way is to support a component of an idea is to support existing spaces with something in a way where they can use this history. But even there, probably we need to say, who starts to get the ball rolling. So at the simplest level, even just, yeah, I think we should be pushing for this, or no, I think this is really too much, or anywhere in between is good to hear from folks. So. Bill.
I mean, obviously, all the positives, Lori laid them out. I concur 100% with all of it. The idea of a museum excites me. My first reaction, however, on setting it up, went right to Vesper's points of millions of dollars I'm looking at right there, and resources or the money, which then leads to me liking your point, get a process going to build on this. I think if we came out, especially in the current environment of very tight state and federal money, it's a no-go, but something that says this was, let's say we embrace it. I don't want to presume, but I think most people see these positives. This idea was embraced, however, recognizing, was embraced. So can we embark on a feasibility study or something like this? Not a legislative study, please. If you don't know, there's a legislative study is goes 6 feet under after 1 year. A feasibility study is an actual document. So somebody shall be charged to look at this, whomever it is, with some specifics. Specificity is the word. That might be a way to go. So thank you.
Excellent. All right, this is very helpful. It's very clarifying, actually, just to touch on these things. This is not the last time we're going to touch on this. This is exactly why we're doing this meeting and 2 more. This seems like one of the areas it's just going to be hard to pin down just right. So what I'm going to do is I'll take this. I'll bring it back to the report, folks. Sam Edwards has offered a lot of good thoughts on this, and I think we can try to process it into a couple of different options on language and then recirculate it and start to use those as different ways to come at this issue. Just understanding that it's a big challenge, and it's a right place for us to be focusing that energy. So if you didn't speak and you want to share your thoughts on that, please email them to the CEDAR crew at the SCSI email address, and you can just say, like, I don't feel like speaking on this, but these are some of my thoughts. That's totally fine. So thank you, everybody. And thanks, CEDAR folks, for setting this up. It's really cool. I like the tool. All right. I think we're going to move on to some of the other recommendations. You've got some of this emailed around. We'll do this for the next 20 minutes or so, and then we'll take a break and then come on back together. What we're going to look at is proposed recommendations about records and records access. So we have 4 groupings that we've taken the many recommendations and kind of put them into. There are 17 recommendations overall, and that makes sense, frankly. We've grouped them as recommendations for changes to management preservation, to how people can get documents, how they're stored, and how that's done. Recommendations for changes to laws about how people can access those. Recommendations to improve access for former patients and residents or their families and researchers, and recommendations to create pathways for people who have these records out and about. Back to Lori's point about Martha Ziegler, like folks who held on to documents and may be afraid to turn them over, or other institutions that have them and somehow came into possession of them. How do we facilitate? How do we make it possible for people to get those documents back into the kind of handling of the state in a responsible way? So let's start with the changes to management, preservation, and access rules. What we've done is simplified what we sent around. At the last meeting, it was made very clear, and is a really good observation from the Cedar folks, that right now some records are held by some agencies where if they try to get them over to the right place, the law says they actually have to destroy them instead. And so anything else that we do probably needs to begin with this first recommendation, which is a moratorium, which means stop on destruction of records. And what this would mean is that we ask the state to stop destroying any institutional records that might be scheduled for destruction until these other changes come into place. And that would make it so that nothing is lost in the process along the way. I don't know if what seems like the best kind of way forward through these, sorry, grabbing a pen cap, if we should just discuss that as a starting place and then move to the next two, or if I should go through all three, but maybe we just start there. And I think a simple way to just get a rough sense on this would be, does anybody have any objections to that? Sam.
Not objection per se, but the moratorium on the destruction of records, I think, needs more clarity, because I think like that's a big category where there's a lot of records that are created within the process of office work that are not historically significant, that are not necessarily worth retaining in the long term. I'm thinking of things like, just day-to-day administrative records. So I think having more clarity around what exactly we do not want to be destroyed would be helpful.
That's great. That's very, very helpful. And I think there are a bunch of ways we can discuss of how to kind of manage the expectations on that. And some of it may be who decides what that moratorium length looks like and who has the power to lift it at some point, because it may be too hard to separate out which documents are where at the beginning. But you're right that very quickly that could become a nightmare where we have 3 million pay stubs that nobody needs anymore. So any other either objections outright, in which case please say so, or modifications or things that concern you about it where you'd like to see them taken into account, and maybe have us just look into it and get back to you with a few answers. Lori, go for it.
To that last point, I was intrigued about how do we know what's important to save and what might not be. It automatically made me think of, and I'm sorry I can't think of his name, the fellow on PBS who does that show Finding Your Roots, right? I wonder if there is such an entity that could maybe advise us on what would be really important to preserve and perhaps what could just go straight to digital. You know what I mean? Because I think we might have good ideas about what that is, but from the perspective of somebody who does this, who researches preserved records and wishes that certain things were preserved and they weren't, or who know what would be best to ensure is reserved first.
Good. So that may move us actually to the next recommendation and a thought about how to handle that. The next recommendation is to identify then key record subcategories, which is what we're talking about here. What should be retained and what shouldn't? And one is to establish these categories in that recommendation, because not all records are significant. So defining what to keep is important. What your comment raises, I think, is perhaps we should be saying that in consultation with, and I guess there, we have members on this commission, all of whom are advocates, represent organizations and entities. Do folks have a sense of, if we were to include language that says, with the advisement of, or by in consultation with, an organization or an agency that you feel has representative voices involved in it and good thinking about this, where you'd be comfortable with them saying, we want these kinds of records kept we're okay with these ones going away. Do you have a sense of who you might recommend? Is it an MOD thing? Is it MDDC? Is it outside organizations, MAMH? Vesper, go for it.
Well, I wouldn't claim to know as much about what's needed for public records or a lot of these things. I do know that at our last meeting, we were talking about a potential contact that we knew, whom I reached out. However, due to some changes, they may or may not be available to do the work at this time. So my other recommendation, I attended a conference. I think I was discussing this with a few others here that I had gone to. I think maybe a year or two ago now, was the Organization for American Historians. I think they may have some guidance, and depending on what direction we take too, I think it'd be a good opportunity to present our findings and work there eventually. But I do think by reaching out to them, we could maybe get some insights in terms of how we can proceed here. I do think the issue of the moratorium and destruction on records, I wouldn't claim to know what that looks like here in Massachusetts, and I think even if we ask others, there may be different requirements state by state. So, yeah, I think that's my recommendation. I know that the Organization for American Historians works with the History Channel, sponsors their conference every year. They've got a lot of experts, and that could be an external entity we could reach out to.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And this leads to also the third recommendation, which is revising the retention schedules so that at the end of all of this, what would happen is they could begin to destroy documents again, but they would know which categories to keep and let go of. And they would have a different timeline than currently exists, because the timeline right now says destroy it all, which is a serious, obviously very serious problem. I think we desperately need to make sure that disability community voices are consulted in identifying those categories. I'm a little less concerned about archives being I think archives has the good sense at the fore of it, just because they deal with so many sensitive documents already, to help guide some of it. But that goes to our dear colleague. So Sam, go for it.
Yeah, I would question if a historian is the right kind of organization to reach out to, just because historians are interpreters of documents and not necessarily like stewards of documents. And I think that the archival profession has like a lot of theory around archival accession and like what do we keep, what do we not keep, that like, there's a lot there, and it's a like big ethical question in the archives field. So I think that would be more the avenue I would pursue.
Okay, so just recapping these, I know that they need a little more specificity about the how and some of the categorization. Again, one option is to say, stop destroying them, and then this group of people needs to make a determination in this amount of time to figure this out. And we have folks on the commission who can help us determine that. But just to sort of canvass the group once more, because this is a big direction to start to go in, and this is a large part of our records recommendations. Any very serious concerns that catch people, or any outright objections where you're like, I don't think so, this is not good, I would rather hear those now. It can be a gut feeling too, to Vesper's point, to Sam's point. So many of us, like, I know we're not all experts on huge areas of this. So this is why we're trying to be sensitive about this. To that end, you can say, I just have a gut feeling that this is wrong, and that is a-okay to be doing. Jim, go for it.
I can get my mic on. Sorry about that.
Oh.
So I'm always mindful of unintended consequences. And one of the issues, depending upon how things kind of proceed, you don't want to have the interpretation be you then have stacks and stacks and stacks of useless information that nobody can access or in an organized way. So I just kind of echoing Sam's point about kind of defining it fairly explicitly and not and defining both content and time frame fairly explicitly so that you what in the end what you're really after is um, organized organized processes and organized information associated with those organized processes, and instructions to facilities and institutions and that currently are the custodians that that are implementable.
Fabulous. Really wise, really helpful. Sam, can we prevail on you to do some brainstorming with archives of the right wording for this and sort of how to, and I would add one other component to what Jim has said, which is which steps in these documents are essential to that as well, like of our other recommendations, just to make sure those aren't accidentally getting in the way of this too. And I have the vision of that last scene of the first Indiana Jones movie of just a warehouse filled with everything, and we don't want to do that to all of you. So if you don't mind taking those up, it sounds like there are no strong objections to doing this. So just get it right, get the language right, and a good first step. So this will come back to us in a few weeks as new language, but pretty close to when we're winding down, because it doesn't sound like this is an area that has overall kind of ethical objections from the crew. So if you do feel that way, please let CEDAR know, and we're going to move on to the next slide and the next set of recommendations. And then I believe we may do the break a little earlier. We'll see. Changes to management, preservation, and access rules. I think because these might be interrelated, I'll just go through them all together. So the recommendation is to develop a clear workflow for record requests, establish a clear and consistent process between the agencies that handle these records, including allowing archives to confirm whether they hold specific individual records. This coordination will streamline access and ensure transparency in records management. So the gist of this is that each agency has its own processes. Those processes might not be aligned. That means that sometimes people don't get documents and can't even know that they exist. And the goal of this would be to get everybody together to develop a clear workflow. Part of that work involves, let's say someone asks for a record, and you find that a sheet of paper that has their loved one's name on it, but it also has 30 other people's names on it. Someone has to cross out all that information, the other information on a photocopy, so you can't see it because that's someone else's medical information in some instances. So the next recommendation would be to make sure that that process is in the hands of archives and not the other agencies, because right now it's not clear who is supposed to be doing it, and that leads to some challenges. So it would house that in archives because archives already does that every day. And then the last recommendation is obviously what we've talked about in these last 5 is a lot of work. The archives has expanded staffing for areas that are very important, like judicial records. And a recommendation would be here to that we recommend that they expand the archive staffing so that there are people in place who can handle all these documents, knowing that this is a pretty big mess to have to start to clean up, and requests will also continue coming in, and we know they come in by the hundreds. So those are our 3 recommendations to look at. Same sort of thing. Anybody with concerns, outright objections, things you think are missing? Very grateful to Sam for informing a lot of these steps and helping us get a sense of archives day-to-day processes. Lori, go for it.
Yeah, just hire additional full-time staff, recommendation number 6. Who hires those full-time staff?
Oh, sure, just up above. So the recommendation is expand archives. You're right. We need to name the stakeholder. Sam, who are we asking for that? If I can put you on the spot.
Probably Caitlin Ramos. Because I don't know if people know this, but she's been moved up to curator, so she's head of archives at this point.
Excellent. So we would ask the curator. Love it. Good catch, Lori. Ask the curator for expansion of the staffing. Okay. That's great. I would imagine like a lot of those recommendations, Lori, we'll have to put in some language too about like where those requests go, but we can tag that certainly and say like it needs to be in the next something something budget or go to something something legislative, gosh knows what. So we'll figure that out. Other comments?
Can I just say one other thing? There has been a number of mentions about, although it be kind of third party removed, references to funding and legislators and budgets and things like that. I just want to put it out there that it doesn't have to be from the legislators, you know what I mean, from the state budget. I don't want to overstate, but there are so many grants available that I think this endeavor could fall under a number of umbrellas. And some of those grant endeavors, we would fit nicely, in there. Like I think of the Cummings Foundation just off the top of my head. And I don't mean to parcel things out, but I just want us to consider the possibility that we don't have to be single sourced. That's all.
Absolutely the case. I think also in-house, right? What we're walking a line on here is to name the issues that need to be resolved and suggest the directions that are easiest for them to be resolved. Because as we all know, these are so complex, these issues, that it's been hard for the agencies to even get the conversation going. But you don't want to overdo it where you're so restrictive in what you say that you're saying do it this one way, and that gets to Jim's point, right? Then we're accidentally backing up into some other issue and creating more trouble than good. There are so many ways where we can gesture in a direction. It is also possible for the Secretary of the Commonwealth to allocate his funds differently when he goes through his budgets. It is possible for the governor to issue executive orders that streamline large portions of this or instruct agency members to do certain work. It's possible for organizations, and Archives already does this, to go out and get grants. So we don't want to over constrain that. We do want to recommend the easiest pathway when there's an easy pathway, just to draw on that expertise. Sam, go for it.
Yeah, I think a question I had about recommendation 5 was in the actual language that you sent us. It seemed like it was more to do with archives records that we hold in our collections. This makes it sound like it's all DMH and DDS records, which seems like a little bit of an overstep. I think the priority was to us to be able to have control of the records that are in our holdings, basically, of being able to redact and release as appropriate.
Fabulous. If you can flag that and send it, it would be fabulous to do. And along those lines also, I'm still very unclear about who has the right to order redactions of certain documents. Like when you get a request at Archives and you got to send that over to DDS, like who says what has to be redacted in what way? I think some of that streamlining would be helpful to know where we should be locating that as we try to help offer ways to clean up the decision making and ease this.
Yeah, because currently we don't handle those records at all. We just create scans of them. We send them to DMH or DDS, and then they make decisions about redactions. I think this is suggesting a little bit of a different approach with the records that have already been deemed historical and archival.
Got it. Yeah, and we want to make sure that we're addressing the key complaint we saw in the informant interviews, which is the feeling that they went from archives to agency to agency to agency and never really came back around. And so to locate it in archives where they originally go is probably the streamlined goal. All right, folks, this is great. I know this is a lot to take on. We are going to take on more because this is huge progress to get through. What we're developing is a sense of consensus so that when we get down to the final document in a month, there aren't surprises for everybody. And so these are our chances to really talk about this stuff. Let's take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to go into a few more of these, if that sounds okay. We'll come back together, let's just say on the hour at 4 o'clock. All right. Thanks, everybody. All right. I think we've got folks coming back. We'll call things back to order and dive in. So where we're going to go with this, folks, is we'll go through some more recommendations. We're going to try to get through the recommendations on records access today. And then at the end, I'd like us to try to take some votes on the general spirit of those recommendations, not the exact wording, but just so that we can feel comfortable starting to draft report language around it, and know that we're going in the right direction. So I'll probably say that again because I know folks are coming back into the meeting as we go, but in the interest of time, our next section is to change laws around records access. There is something called the Sunset Law that is currently in front of the legislature. Archives has advised on it. The Secretary of the Commonwealth recommends it. It would change the existing laws in the state to open up institutional records after 75 years. With the exception that, and other states have laws like this, they do not get in the way of HIPAA, which is the Federal Privacy Act on medical records. So if someone's still alive, you are not getting those records. No one is getting those records. And the language of the law is specific to records in the holdings of the archives. It is not for active DDS or DMH records. So if someone is still alive and being served by DDS, this law does not grant people access, even if those documents are 75 years old. The next is to implement use restrictions for public records. What we mean by that is the state can pass this law, and if there are no rules that they put in place, then people could start copying things and throwing them all over the web. And obviously there are concerns about that. And there are also good examples of how government deals with that already. An example would be if you go get a birth or a death certificate at the Registry of Vital Statistics, it says right on it, you can't photo this and spread it everywhere. And so what this would say is, hey, archives, this law should pass, and we agree that it should pass, but also you need to develop some rules around this to make sure that people are respectful when they get records about how they use stuff. And that seems, I think, only reasonable. An example would be at many archives, you sign an agreement with them saying, I won't do that. And they make exceptions on a case-by-case basis. If someone, say, has a disability where they can't make it to the archive, they work with them. So that's where it's better to have rules than a law, because the rules let them be flexible about how to meet people's needs, but protect the spirit of not putting things out there just everywhere. And the last is to modify laws regarding restricted medical records. This would be a call to change existing laws to allow researchers to access medical records within 50 years of an individual's death upon proving that the person is deceased. That's actually not correct to, I think, what the recommendation says in the original document, so I want to amend that. What this would do, and I think the best thing for us to do is strike this until our next meeting. The intent of it, if I remember correctly, came out of meetings where it was about family members who want to access records when their loved one died less than 50 years ago. So for instance, one of the informant interviews, many of the informant interviews were about relatives of people who died in a state institution, but it was really impossible for them to find a way to access their loved one's medical records because they were not formally designated by a court as that person's guardian. And so this would be a way of allowing them to look at this. I don't think any of us ever approved. Just to be clear, researchers is a different thing. And I don't think that was the spirit of what the commission was after. So on the first two of these, I wonder if there are any, objections, outright no's. Drew, go for it.
Yes, hi, Andrew Leverell. I was just curious, and I apologize, I couldn't get in the last meeting, so I don't know if you covered this. On recommendation 8, can you explain that a little more? Because I'm just confused as to how, if we make something a public record, we can restrict somebody from using it in a particular way once it enters the public domain.
It goes right to Sam, thank God.
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about that. I mean, I think that there's already things in archives that have some use restrictions, particularly around like fragility, like a lot of the 1600s and 1700s records. We will show you the online version, but not the, physical record because of the fragility of it. But there's also restrictions around things like security, things like privacy, and also just, there can also be internal kind of restrictions, like we're not going to digitize this, but we, know it's here, and, we know that, if folks are asking for it, they can look at it. So that's kind of the thought process behind that. So there's like layers of restriction within archives that like is from, extremely restricted, no one can view it, as kind of is the case now with these records, unless they have a court order, all the way to, things like the vital records from, 1910s that are all on Family Search and can be found by anybody around the world. So there's a lot of gray area between that.
Okay, thank you. Understood. I was thinking if if I came in and you gave me a copy of a record, then you could tell me that I can't go post it online or something like that, which I was wondering how we'd police that. But okay, thank you. That makes sense.
Awesome. Great question. Other folks, questions, things that worry about this? Camille, go for it, please.
Yeah, I just had kind of a clarification question. So specifically with recommendation 7, would this, I guess I don't really know anything about this area of the law. So my question really is just like, would this be treating these types of records similarly to the records of people like who don't have disabilities or who weren't in institutions? Like, is this a similar requirement across the board for all individuals?
Great question. I'm happy to answer, but I do want to give Sam again, if you want to chime in, I'll give you the opportunity to do so.
So my understanding is that the law applies to all records that are over 75 years that, don't have some kind of safety restriction or something like that. But that medical records are a little bit different because of the HIPAA law, which is 50 years after death of the individual. So it's kind of 75 years or 50 years after death of the individual. So like if someone's 93 or something and they were, institutionalized when they were 20, you can't look at their record, right? If they're alive. And yeah, so that's kind of the thought there.
In the most recent filing of the bill, it has come up over the years. For maybe 10 years, the secretary has pushed it. The biggest concern was that as it was originally written, it didn't narrow it the way that you're asking, and it seemed to apply to DDS records and DMH records that were active and over there, like not good. And so this year, with the advice of the House Counsel, they've narrowed it very much. It specifically says institutional records, and it kind of uses very similar language to the commission to define the state institutions that are currently restricted. That's going to create some of its own small issues, I'm sure, but it generally applies in that way, and then has that kind of breaker that Sam's describing, where it's one or the other kicks in depending on whether the individual is alive and where HIPAA sits on the issue. So sorry, I know it's like it's like the most complex one-line bill I have ever seen in my life. It has so many layers to it. So other folks, thoughts, comments? Great. All right. We're going to keep on moving. We'll circle back. I said just when we came back together 10 minutes ago, I know some folks were still coming back. What we'll do at the end is go back through all of these and take a kind of vote on consensus around the general spirit of the recommendations, not the letter of them, because it's understood that those need revision based on our conversations, but a vote on like, I do or do not support the general direction that each of these recommendations is going in. We will strike recommendation 9. So let's keep on moving. The next section's on improving access overall. Like we heard from so many people, getting access to records proved very, very, very difficult. And we want to try to clarify that with some helpful steps and make those processes easier. Recommendation 10 is a very straightforward step on that, to post clear instructions for records access that's plain language, easy to understand, and consistent across agencies. So if someone thinks, oh yeah, my loved one was in this facility, so I'm going to look on the DDS website, they see the same accessible language that they would if they went to the archives website or to DMH website, wherever they go. The second recommendation, in line with much of the work that Archives is already doing, would be to create a searchable public inventory. Obviously, this wouldn't include people's names on it. But the goal here would be that if you knew your loved one lived in an institution, it could be very frustrating to spend years and a lot of money trying to access those records, especially if you had to go through a court process, only to find out that the records didn't exist at all. And a public inventory divided by categories would tell people, oh, wow, if all of the records from this institution for people with the last name that begins with these letters don't exist anymore, it would help them know right away that they shouldn't go looking. It would help everybody access information a little more easily. The baseline for that actually already exists to some degree in some things that Sam has shared around, and it's interesting to see. So they wouldn't violate people's privacy, but they would tell you the types of records that exist, and as a result, the types that don't anymore. The last recommendation is born out of our earlier meetings, and I think a good sign that when folks comment, we are adding stuff in. This comes from our colleague Evelyn Mateo's points that it's very hard to go through these records alone, that can be a very difficult process, and that it's very helpful to have a companion if you can. And we realize that many people don't have a companion very, very easily at hand. And so the language of this, and it's more specific about who would do it and how in the documents you received last week, would be to train peer guides for individuals with disabilities, other folks with disabilities, to go through those with you so that you feel like you have a companion going through that process. So those are our 3 recommendations. There's more detail in the files that were circulated about exactly where and how, but again, the general sort of feeling I would love to know, I like this one, I don't like that one, I changed this one, questions you have, anything at all. Lori, go for it.
I just have a question. So 12 recommendations, they move forward to who?
Our recommendations?
Yeah. Where do they go?
They go to the legislature, they go to the president of the Senate, they go to the Speaker of the House, they go to all of the members and the clerk of those 2 groups through that, and they become a public document and recommendation. I think that we're also at liberty. This obviously will also go to the governor. And so
then is there then, here are the recommendations, and we ask that someone sponsor to adopt these recommendations? Like what's the ask then? Here are the recommendations, but then what's the ask about the recommendation? So what's the action step after this?
So to a larger degree, we're going to have to take that up next month of who enforces this, who oversees it. Do we want to ask that the commission continues its work? Our mandate ends when we submit the report. Do we take it up and continue in some form? And in which case we need someone to file a bill. To your point on the accountability of that, that's one way to ensure accountability. Another way to ensure accountability is that the sponsors of the bill could some way through the State House arrange for hearings and regular check-ins to make sure that things are being done with the report. There's also community stakeholders who can ask for that. But our work, to be very specific, the reason that the documents that were circulated earlier in the week are specific the way that they are is they tell everyone which agencies or individuals we think need to take up the work to fix the problem that we're addressing. And they divide them into those recommendations saying, you, archives, will coordinate this process. You, DMH, DDS, need to do the following. Now, do they have to do it? No, we have no mandate to say that. But the 500-page report that comes with this documents that this is a significant and serious issue. And our recommendations come with the weight of having been specifically tasked by the legislature to look into this and come up with recommendations. So we're sitting in a process right now that gives us the legitimacy to make those recommendations.
So, not that I want to add on anything, but I wonder if we could think about some sort of language somewhere, somehow, that says, should these recommendations be, I don't even know what the word is, adopted, we ask that so-and-so or this department or this entity oversee its implementation. And the reason I say that is Victor would remember this, but Mass Families long time ago for 11 years worked on proposing a bill that did eventually pass after 11 years called Chapter 171, the Family and Individual Support Law. And it passed. There were things that, under that law that need to be done. There are 7 agencies under the Executive Office in Health and Human Services that have to file annual family support plans with the governor's office. And it was the victory of all victories for us. But then nothing, like there's no mechanism for anybody to check if these 7 named agencies actually did file their report and if those reports are actually being implemented. So just a lesson learned that maybe we should think about that part too. Like not only, recommend that these be adopted, but then where will it be held and how can we know that it's being followed through or implemented? And maybe that's just a theoretical question for never to be answered, but I just wanted to put it out there because there's so much work that went into this, and these are such excellent recommendations. I'd hate to see it just get filed and forgotten, if you will.
I think it's absolutely right. Definitely dive into the documents that are the larger Microsoft Word document versions of the recs that are getting circulated. And there, what we're trying to do is exactly what you're recommending, because you're right. And I think that came out of our process too of forming the commission, that making sure that it's very clear who the stakeholders are is the only way to get it done. And I think that the upside through that process is that the Senate and the House understood that that was a place where we had needed more support at the beginning. And B, we pretty swiftly found folks in the agencies who took up that work who've given great examples of how to find the allies to make sure it gets implemented, and learned along the way, I think, how to be more specific. So take a look at those definitely. And you have my word that we're going to try to work on crafting them as specifically as possible, because it is a lot of agencies, very easy for things to just get dropped, and we don't want to see all this work get turned around. So I do really appreciate that. Other thoughts on these? All right, we're going to keep on rolling. We have just a couple more for improving access to records, and then we're going to look at pathways, and then we'll come back and vote. We're pretty much there. So one of the things that we found in the informant interviews that are in the report is that probate fees, the cost of going to court and being appointed a guardian, even to someone who is long deceased, so that you can have the right to view their records, is a very costly and lengthy process. The recommendation here is to waive the fee of that and simplify the filing instructions. And to Lori's point, the organization identified in that recommendation to help oversee the implementation of that is the Mental Health Legal Advisors Committee, which is a wing of the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts, because they are often the place where people are referred to actually by archives already for some of the legal issues. They're very aware of this and know that the financial aspect is something that needs work on, and so does the uniform filing instruction, because judges interpret this very, very differently. And so it would place the responsibility for that in the hands of people who have run into those issues, work with living people now and know how to legally develop language that will not negatively impact the living or create very serious probate issues in contested situations, but will make it possible for people to access records that they might want to have access to about a deceased loved one in a simplified form. Recommendation 14 is one of the most crucial things, which is that at present, many people cannot find out if their loved one is buried in an anonymous grave in a state institutional cemetery, because the record of their burial, the cemetery register or that relative information, is considered by the state to be a medical record. But in actuality, that is a record of death. And it's very unusual that this interpretation exists, because records of birth, death, marriage, divorce are considered what are called vital records, which in Massachusetts are widely accessible. The argument put forward is that we can't say that they were buried in an institutional cemetery because that acknowledges that they were at the institution. But that's medical information. The problem being that a death certificate can be accessed by anybody and will tell you that they were in the institution and is freely accessible. So it's not actually a consistent regulation, and it is not something practiced by the Department of Vital Records, which holds all the other vital records. And so this recommendation is to clarify, and it specifies in the document which agencies would do this. I think it's the Attorney General's office. Clarify that these are vital records. It follows a very similar decision in Washington State, where a judge the Attorney General overrode the state archives, which was not allowing access to these records, and said they are vital records, they must be opened up. So those are our two last improvements on records to recommend. Thoughts, concerns, issues, worries? Lori, go for it.
So I just want to make sure I heard you right. So making sure or recommending and seeing that these are considered vital records, you still don't have a right to know where they buried, only that they died?
No, you would know their burial location based on.
That's part of the vital record? Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. It doesn't tell you the exact spot all the time, but it would get people close enough, and there's actually a workable process there for them to be able to easily locate their loved one in a lot of instances. So, other folks' thoughts, concerns? All right, we keep on rolling. Our last section. You are all heroes for sticking with this. Thank you. I know this is a marathon. I promise the records part is the largest of our 3 buckets of things we're recommending. And we have already done, I don't know if the last session we talked a lot about the framework for remembrance stuff. So other than the museum, we'll have to come back and take a vote on the general premise of those ideas, but we got very far. There was general consensus that some kind of apology from the state was a good idea. Some of these other ideas, public education was something that there was general support for. So we're in pretty good shape after we go through these. This last issue deals with the fact that there are records all over the place. Sometimes someone dies and their loved ones find that they worked at a state institution and they saved all these records. Now they have them and they don't know whether they can give them back or not, or if they're going to be prosecuted for holding them. There are private universities, as we saw in the report from Cedar. Harvard holds medical records from some state institutions. They made their way over there somehow, here somehow. And that's not necessarily appropriate that those things are there. Local museum groups or historical societies have records. Everyone's in kind of a bad spot of knowing what to do with them. There's also the sale of these documents, sometimes with individuals' medical information going on online, which has been a national issue recognized as a serious problem. And so these were recommendations informed by the report on this, a lot of it taken up by Kate Benson, who's obviously worked a lot around these issues. So recommendation 15 is to propose a temporary moratorium on prosecuting people if they give the documents back. And this recommendation goes to the Attorney General and to the archives to devise a way where you could put out there and say, if you have these and you're worried about having them, please bring them. We need them. They belong at the state because someone's probably looking for them. But we're not going to prosecute you for having them because I think people right now are probably afraid of that. Recommendation 16 is that the Attorney General issue a cease and desist order to online marketplaces, telling them that when they allow for the sale of institutional documents with patient names on them, that is a violation of those people's privacy, and that they shouldn't actually be in possession of those documents, which were originally state-owned documents. The last recommendation is in some form or another for archives to come up with maybe a nicer word than demand, but an outstretched hand to the institutions and archives around the state that do possess these items, and request that they turn them back over at this point, because scattered records we've seen in the report from Cedar were one of the biggest problems people faced, is just running around the state trying to find where the records were and not knowing that they were actually held in private hands or something like that. And so that I want to emphasize has been a source. I don't try to overuse this word. People have described that runaround as becoming a traumatic experience for them. They're trying to find records on a loved one who's deceased, and they know they're somewhere and they can't find them. And often what they're finding is that they're in someone else's hands. So we got to start getting them back in the right spot. Those are those three recommendations. Again, opening the floor to any concerns, comments, additions, contributions, things you've experienced or seen, anything at all. And Sam, if you have anything you want to share on these recommendations, you obviously are kind of ground zero for this at Archive, so feel free to chime in, please. All right. I'll take that as consensus. Cool. Up, Lori, go for it.
So I was just wondering, the first sentence, have the institutional records return them to Massachusetts Archives. So I'm wondering if there's a small prerequisite to that statement, in as much as maybe a preamble to that statement should be, Massachusetts legislature has deemed these records property of the Massachusetts Archives. Because when you say return them to the Massachusetts Archives, it almost implies that they were taken from there, and perhaps they weren't.
That's a fabulous point. You sound like a well-trained contract lawyer there, Lori. That's awesome. Sam, can I turn to you for help with modifications on that later?
Yeah, of course.
Fabulous, and getting that language right. That is great. Good eye. Cool. All right, folks. Before we go into taking up any kind of voting language and stuff, and that'll take our last little bit. This is obviously a huge amount. Just to contextualize, this is a year's built, just sort of summary of the many issues around records that we're trying to address from these institutions. And I think the goal is to really make a positive impact in a way that helps people right away with some of the things that have been most painful and damaging to them. I know it can sound really legalese. It's talking about pieces of paper, which can very quickly get to feel very removed, but there's a deep, deep, deep human connection to this that the folks who work in this are hearing every single day. I know, Sam, you're getting calls constantly from people who really, really, really just want a very simple answer and are astonished to find that this is the landscape that exists. It's just too hard to navigate. So we're doing the hard work of trying to help remedy that. To that end, if there is anything you think we're missing, anything that's worth further exploration within reason, given the time we have over the weeks ahead, that strikes you based on this conversation about records access, please, I would love to take that up now, and we can add it to the list and try to address it in the coming weeks, and see where it fits. So if something's worrying you in general about this, please do say so. Something just missing or something you want emphasized also, that could be another big part of this. Our goal will be to try to make it so that 17 recommendations are presented in a way that is very clear and organized, so it doesn't feel overwhelming and get people to tune out. And we'll emphasize the key steps that start the process and really make the most difference first. Lori, please.
Yeah, not a concern. I would just say if I was a teacher and I had these recommendations in front of me, I would get my gold stars out and I would give 10 stars to number 14. Just saying.
14, awesome. Okay, where's number 14? Which was that? Sorry, I'm in a wash of paper here. And hold on. 14. Which was 14 for? Oh, clarifying the access to the institutional cemetery burial ordinance. Absolutely. And I want you to know that, you know, in our next two meetings, we're going to return to the framework for remembrance stuff, do the same votes we're going to do in a moment in the general spirit of things. We're also going to look at the last section, which is the cemetery section specifically. And I do have in the notes for the report committee or working group that your comment also, Lori, on modifying the law on experimentation and autopsies, the medical experimentation stuff on folks who are deceased from institutions. And so that will be reflected in there as well as kind of a related issue to the cemetery records overall. So, all right, let's do this. Let's go back to our earlier slides. We'll roll through things. I talked with the CEDAR folks a little bit about this, some kind of language. This is rough language, so please, if someone has ideas for how to work on this, what I would be looking for is a motion to endorse the importance of the strategies presented page by page. We can group them however we want, while not endorsing the exact wording. I understand that we have to work on the wording, but what this would be is our general sense that the commission approves or does not approve of moving forward with specific recommendations. So I know this will require a little back and forth and some things like that, but if we could go back to whichever the first slide on these was, yeah, there we go. And we were to just start with these three recommendations. That a reasonable chunk, folks? Do you think that we should just be voting on everything? Should we be voting in different chunks? Either way, we got to vote on everything. It's just how we do it. So you should see me with putting furniture together. It's not a pretty sight. So organizing these things is not my forte. So Bill, you look like a man who organizes things.
I could move and you could see my desk and I could refute that totally, but we've gone through everything. You've painstakingly gone through everything. I think we can do it as a group. There was good discussion. I don't think you have to repeat the same discussion, is my opinion.
Other thoughts on that? I like your deflection of painstaking rather than just painful, so thank you. This would obviously be with the removal of item number 9, which I know we've got to get the language right on. So that we could say excluding number 9.
Alex, I want to thank you for yesterday, but I'm going to tell you this. Records, if a person gets a copy of the records, they should not be copied by anybody. They should follow the rules, and it should be known that these people that get their records, they want to know where their people come from. So I would say make it as easy as possible to make sure that people understand why the people want their records and why they should have them. Because if they were in their shoes and they were in the institution, they'd understand why. Thank you.
More than any of us could possibly say. You hit it right on the head. Thank you, Reggie. And thanks for yesterday. What a blast. It's always so good to be with you. So, and Sam, I think that's the
And
thing.
Victor, enjoy your retirement.
Yeah, damn straight. All right, let's do this. Let's, if I could have some voting language from folks on items, on the recommendations here, with the exception of number 9, that is worded in some nice way that I lost right in front of me. But if someone has some, yeah, Vesper, go for it. What do you got?
Would this be with the purpose of making a motion for us to vote? So I'm going to make a motion that we vote on these recommendations with the exception of recommendation 9.
I'll second that motion.
Roll call vote. Any discussion on that? Any modifications to that? Drew, please. Oops, you're muted. Sorry, man.
Sorry.
No,
Just so just to clarify, we're voting to approve the recommendations, correct? We're not just voting to vote on the recommendations?
Correct.
Okay, yes, so I will agree to, yep, approval of the recommendations. All right.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that's a good. Sorry, I'm processing that too. So it's all right, good. So let's do a roll call vote then, I guess.
Okay, thank you, Alex. This is Christine from Cedar. And as per usual, I will read out members' names in alphabetical order by your last names. And when your name is called, please respond with yes, no, present, or abstain. So I'll begin with Elise Aaron. Kate Benson. Sister Linda Bessam. Reggie Clark.
Yes.
Thank you, Reggie. James Cooney.
Yes.
Samuel Edwards.
Yes.
Anne Fract.
Yes.
Alex Green.
Yes.
Bill Henning.
Yes.
Camille Karabek.
Yes.
Andrew Leverell.
Yes.
Evelyn Mateo. Lori Medeiros.
Yes.
Vesper Moore.
Yes.
And Brenda Rankin.
Folks, thank you. That's momentous. It's big. That's a huge amount of our work right there. Sam, the report committee, and I, and obviously Anne and Kate will start kind of working through these things and refining them and getting them into shape over the next month. So you have our word on that. And I think at this point we go back to our fearless leader, Anne. We're at the wrap up, I think, a little bit ahead of schedule. So.
I'd like to thank everyone that's here. We look forward to seeing you at the next full commission meeting on May 8th. We'll be sending you information about the meeting. And We want to make sure that works for everybody. Speak now. If members have any questions before then, you should feel free to contact Cedar or Alex or myself or Kate. If there's no other items to discuss, can we vote to adjourn the meeting? Please unmute yourselves for the roll call vote. Do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make a motion to adjourn. Sorry, this is Andrew Leverell. Before we do that, can we just clarify, there's definitely a meeting on May 8th, and then we holding the 15th for a possible meeting as well?
There's a meeting the 15th also.
Okay, all right, thank you. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
And do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is Christine Roa from Cedar. So once again, I'll be reading out members' names in alphabetical order by your last names. And again, when you hear your name, please respond with yes, no, present, or abstain. Elise Aaron. Kate Benson. Sister Linda Bessam. Reggie Clark.
Yes.
Thank you. James Cooney.
Yes.
Samuel Edwards.
Yes.
Anne Frack.
Yes.
Alex Green. Bill Henning.
Yes.
Camille Karabeck.
Yes.
Andrew Leverell.
Yes.
Evelyn Mateo. Lori Medeiros.
Yes.
Vesper Moore.
Yes.
And Brenda Rankin. Did I miss anyone?
First, say thank you and meeting adjourned.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Best wishes, everyone. Congratulations and good luck.
Good
Don't be
luck,
a stranger.
Victor.
Take care, everybody.
Awesome.
That was great. That was great. I am so
Yeah.
sorry I missed that
Are you
typo. Oh my God.
Oh,
I looked
I'm
at it. I was
sorry,
like,
you got
oh,
one-
shoot.
One typo out of 17 recommendations. Pretty
As you put it up and I was like,